A single photograph ignites a spiral of hidden pasts, dangerous alliances, and a truth rising from Manhattan's shadows. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the murder he couldn't forget. I've had the morning paper land at my feet like a dying pigeon. I've had a process server hide behind a milk truck to catch me. And I've had a lovesick cabbie deliver me a bouquet meant for a dancer on 8th Avenue. But I'd never opened our front door to find a photograph leaning against the brass knocker, as though it had politely rung the bell and decided to wait its turn. The sun wasn't even fully up. Manhattan was still stretching its arms, deciding whether to be civilized or criminal for the day. At 7:12 a.m., we were in that tight little window where the honest folk were sipping coffee and the dishonest ones were just starting to regret things. I bent and picked up the photograph. A single black and white print, glossy, expensive paper, the kind people keep as evidence or as ammunition. The woman in it was mid-laugh, head tipped slightly, a fur-trimmed coat framing her like she'd been drawn by someone who knew how to flatter cheekbones. Behind her glowed the unmistakable neon sprawl of the Monarch Club, which I knew well enough to avoid unless paid hazard rates. On the back, scrawled in a firm but frantic hand, "Ask Wolfe why he forgot." Under that, as an afterthought, someone had written my name. Well, good morning to me. I carried the photograph inside, shutting the door with a soft click, because Fritz was still asleep, and the only thing that could make his day worse than me waking him early was startling him into dropping a pan of something Swiss and expensive. The brownstone was quiet. Too quiet. Even the house seemed to hold its breath at that hour. In the office, Wolfe was already at his desk. That alone told me something was off. Wolfe is not a morning creature unless orchids are involved, and since it wasn't yet 9, he had no right to be anywhere but upstairs communing with petals that cost more than my suits. He didn't look at me when I entered. He was reading the Gazette, glasses perched halfway down his nose, one eyebrow raised in mild disapproval of whatever human folly had made page 1. "I see you're up, sir," I said, which was my polite way of saying, "You're breaking routine, and I'd like to know why before I call a doctor." Shh. Wolfe didn't appreciate commentary on his habits. "If Fritz has begun breakfast preparations, inform him I will require coffee immediately." "That's not going to help what I found on the doorstep," I said, stepping closer. "And no, it wasn't the milk." I handed him the photograph. Wolfe lifted it with 2 fingers as though it might try to bite him. The moment his eyes hit the image, his posture changed. Not a lot, but enough. Wolfe is a master of stillness. He could outstatue a statue. But the photograph made his jaw tighten, just slightly, and his left thumb paused in mid-stroke against the arm of his chair. "Confound it," he muttered. "A lesser man might have missed it. I didn't. You know her." "I do not," he snapped. He turned the photo over, read the message, and the muscle in his cheek fluttered. Wolfe does not flutter. That was like watching a cathedral door quiver. "You recognize her," I pressed. "Archie." His voice dropped into the tone reserved for stubborn plants and foolish millionaires. "You will refrain from inference until you have facts." "Sure, then give me one. Why is my name on the back of a picture of a woman you've never met standing outside a club you'd never be caught dead in?" He glared. Wolfe's glare could peel varnish. A knock at the office door saved him from either lying or throwing the bell cord at me. Fritz entered carrying the morning tray, complete with Wolfe's coffee, my coffee, and a single buttered roll meant for whoever behaved themselves. Fritz glanced at Wolfe's expression, then at me, then at the photograph on the desk. He didn't ask. Sensible man. "Breakfast is nearly ready, sir," Fritz said. "Not now," Wolfe said. "Leave us." Fritz departed with the tight-lipped calm of a man who had once watched Wolfe send back an omelette on grounds of philosophical disagreement. Wolfe returned his attention to me. "You will go to the Monarch Club." "That's the instruction? Not a please or a justification? Just go to the Monarch Club?" He closed his eyes briefly, which is Wolfe speak, for I am tolerating you, but you are skating on thin ice with a furnace underneath. "Go," he said, "make inquiries. Discreetly." "Can I bring Saul?" "No, not yet." I grinned at the rigidity in his tone. "So there is something you're not telling me?" "Archie." He leaned forward, the chair groaning beneath him. "Do your work." Fine. If Wolfe wanted to play the enigmatic genius routine, he'd get it, but not without commentary. Before leaving, I took the photograph again. Wolfe watched my hand linger on it. "Do not," he said quietly, "lose that." I pocketed it. That's when I saw the protectiveness. Wolfe wasn't worried about the photo. He was worried about what would come after. The Monarch Club at 9 in the morning looks like a circus that hasn't decided whether to pack up or start another show. The neon was off, but the place still reeked of perfume, cigarettes and money. Expensive money, the kind that takes taxis to hide its sins. Victor Hale, the club manager, had the type of smile that looked professionally polished. "Mr. Goodwin," he said as if greeting a creditor, "we don't open until 5. "I'm not here for the floor show," I said. "I'm here about a woman." "Try Broadway," he answered. "That's what I'm doing. She's in a photo taken right outside your sign." He stiffened. Barely. "A lot of people take pictures here." "Uh-huh. But not all of them leave them on Nero Wolfe's doorstep." That got the reaction I wanted. His smile cracked like an egg in a frying pan. "I don't know her," he said too quickly. "Never seen her." Red herring, party of one. The cigarette girl, Lila Dawn, was next. She was all legs and red lipstick, probably the most awake person in the building. I showed her the photo. She blinked twice, then shook her head. "No idea who she is, sweetie." Sweetie. I made a mental note never to return, not unless she was handing out free cigarettes that didn't come with an attitude. Marco Trent, the pianist, was easier. Musicians are creatures of habit. His habit seemed to be wearing tuxedos like second skin. He studied the picture too long before shrugging. "Sorry," he said. "Faces blur." "That one didn't blur," I said. "She's pretty clear." "So is my answer." Strike 3. The Monarch Club knew something, they just weren't sharing. When I returned to the brownstone, I found Kramer waiting in the office, hunched over like the furniture had offended him. His cigar was unlit only because Fritz would have committed homicide if he'd tried. Kramer lifted a photograph identical to mine, except his had a police property stamp and a corpse attached to it. "She was murdered this morning," he said without drama. 2 hours ago. I felt something in my gut sink. The woman in the photograph wasn't just a pretty face with a message anymore. She was a dead pretty face with a message. "Her name?" I asked. "Eleanor Vale," Kramer said. "Regular at the Monarch Club. You want to tell me why a photo of her showed up at Wolfe's?" Wolfe, sitting as immovable as a courthouse statue, folded his hands over his stomach. "I do not," he said. Kramer narrowed his eyes. "You know, for once could you—" "No," Kramer exhaled through his nose, controlling the steam instead of blowing it. "Fine. Then you'll cooperate when I bring warrants." Wolfe inclined his head. "If you must." It was the politest way I'd ever heard anyone tell a police inspector to go soak his head. Kramer grunted and pocketed the photo. "Goodwin, stay available. NYPD may need you." "That's not new," I said. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he left, closing the door gently. Wolfe stared at the door for a long time, then at me, then at the damn photograph. "Archie," he said, "we must tread carefully." Which, coming from Wolfe, was the equivalent of a full-blown emotional confession. I sat at my desk, flipping the photograph over with my thumb. "So what now?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "Now," he said, "we work." The clock chimed 8. Orchid hours were coming, but Wolfe didn't move. And that, more than the corpse, more than the message, more than the Monarch Club's collection of liars, told me this case was going to be trouble. If there's one thing I've learned from working for Nero Wolfe, it's that any case involving a mysterious patron, a concealed key, and a nightclub with neon brighter than its morals is bound to ruin my shoe leather before lunch. At 9:14 the next morning, I found myself climbing the stairs of a brownstone in Murray Hill to interview Eleanor Vale's landlady, armed with nothing but a notebook, my best grin, and Wolfe's insistence that I avoid frivolity, which, naturally, guaranteed I would commit some. Mrs. Renford opened the door with the suspicious glare of someone who expected the rent collector but feared the police. She was pale, thin as an hour past breakfast, and had the nervous habit of pinching her sleeves as though checking for ration coupons. "You're the detective?" she asked. "I'm the legman," I said. "The detective's legs, arms, and temperament. I'm Archie Goodwin." She ushered me into a cramped parlour that smelled faintly of dust, fading violets, and whatever brand of perfume Eleanor had favoured before switching to more expensive stuff. A radio sat silent on a doily. A cat glared from a windowsill with more intimidation than most men I'd met. Mrs. Renford twisted her hands. I told the police everything. I'm not the police, I said, and I'm easier on the furniture. That earned the smallest flicker of a smile, which I took as progress. I need to know, I began, opening my notebook, whether Eleanor Vale had any visitors. Men, specifically. Mrs. Renford nodded slowly. There was one, tall, walked with a limp. She paused as though expecting thunder to crack. He never gave his name. Did he ever leave a card, a note, initials carved into the paint? No, she shuddered. He came late at night, always after 11. The wartime years had done a number on half of Manhattan's lower limbs, so a limp wasn't exactly a one-in-a-million detail. "Ma'am," I said, "between veterans, tap dancers with poor timing, and men who've fallen off bar stools, half this city limps. Anything else?" She hesitated. He paid her bills sometimes. That woke me up. Paid them how? Cash, folded into envelopes. Anonymous patronage, I muttered. A classic. Mrs. Renford wrung her hands again. I never saw his face clearly. He always kept to the shadows. Shadows are crowded in this town, I said. Thank you. You've been helpful. As I left, the cat hissed at me. I hissed back. It understood. At 10:03, I met Saul Pantzer outside Eleanor's building. If you've never watched Saul work, imagine a man who could tail his own shadow and win. He wore his usual flat cap, neutral suit, and expression of calm capability. "Morning," I said. Saul tipped his head. "Wolfe wants it quiet." Wolfe always wants it quiet. Murder disagrees. We entered Eleanor's apartment. The police had cleared out, leaving the faint chalk outline that always hits harder when the room is too tidy. Saul moved like a whisper, analysing without disturbance. "Perfume," he murmured. I sniffed. I smelled dust, lilies and regret. "No," Saul said. "Something expensive. Belle d'Argent. Only sold at the Fifth Avenue boutique. Hard to get." "That narrows down our suspects to wealthy men and women with taste, meaning we're doomed." Saul didn't smile. He never did unless someone paid him to. While he checked the bedroom, I inspected the vanity drawer. Lipsticks aligned like soldiers, a comb, a silver compact, and, hidden behind the lining, a small brass key. "Well, well," I said, holding it up. "A princess without a castle." Saul studied it. No tag, not a door key. Safety box? Locker? Something personal. "Everything about this case is personal," I said. "Wolfe's acting like he swallowed a confession." Saul raised an eyebrow. He recognized her? I pocketed the key. He recognized something. We left the apartment at 10:42, careful not to disturb anything else. Evidence belongs to the police. I stick to notes, observations, and occasional wisecracks. At 11:30, I called Lon Cohen from a payphone. The newsroom sounded like an argument between a printing press and a caffeinated gorilla. "Archie," Lon shouted, "your dead monarch dame is turning into a headline. Want the juicy bits?" "Only the professional ones," I said. "Save the gossip for lunch." Lon rustled pages. "She once filed a sealed lawsuit against the Monarch Club, records sealed tight as a banker's conscience." "Cause?" "No idea. Blackmail, hush money, or something spicier." "Spicier how?" "Archie," Lon warned, "you can't handle spicy." "Try me." "Nope, but I'll send the clippings." I hung up, wondering how many people wanted to keep Eleanor quiet, and how many wanted her silenced forever. The Fifth Avenue boutique was the sort of place that made me wish for hazard pay. Mirrors gleamed, perfume bottles sparkled, and the saleswoman eyed me as though I'd wandered in looking for socks. "I'm looking for information," I said. "We sell perfume," she replied. "Right. Belle d'Argent. Who bought it recently?" "Confidential." I pulled out the photograph of Eleanor, not the crime scene one, just the smiling Monarch Club photo. She wore it. Recognition flickered across the woman's face. "Oh, her. Yes, she came often, always escorted." "By?" "A gentleman, tall, walked with a limp." "Let me guess," I said. "Never gave his name." "Never," she confirmed. "Anything else?" "He always paid in cash. She never did. And he didn't like her speaking to staff." "Well, that's romantic," I said. "Thanks." I left with a clearer picture. Eleanor Vale was connected to someone rich, discreet, and capable of keeping secrets with the efficiency of a locked vault. It was nearly 4 p.m. when I returned to the brownstone. Orchid hours. I knew better than to interrupt Wolfe while he worshipped at the altar of petals, so I sat at my desk and sorted the day's clues into neat piles: limping men, cash patrons, belle d'argent, lawsuits, missing ledger pages, and one brass key that refused to explain itself. At 6:03, the elevator groaned, and Wolfe descended like a monarch returning from exile. He entered the office with the stiffness of a man still thinking about roots, stems, and what fools humans are by comparison. "You're late," I said. "Phooey," Wolfe grumbled, lowering himself into his chair. "Report." I did. The landlady's phantom visitor, Saul's perfume analysis, the key, the sealed lawsuit, the boutique's escort witness. Wolfe absorbed it all with heavy eyelids and a jaw that tightened every time I said limp. When I finished, he tapped a finger against the desk. "Archie?" "Yes, sir?" I must confess something. If he had told me the orchids had learned to talk, I would not have been more stunned. He continued, "The woman in the photograph approached me 6 years ago. She requested my assistance in locating a missing friend, a young woman." "What happened?" I asked. I declined. What? You declined a missing persons case?" "It interfered with my routine," Wolfe said sharply. "I was engaged with other matters." I stared. "And you think refusing her got her killed?" "I think," he said slowly, "that consequences sometimes arrive belatedly and noisily." That was as close to guilt as Wolfe ever came. He looked heavier, as though the photograph on his desk had gained weight. "Archie," he said, "this murder is the echo of something unfinished." Before I could respond, the phone rang. I answered. It was Lon. "Archie," he said breathlessly, "I found something else. Another photograph of Eleanor. This one has a limping man in the background." "Same guy?" "Looks like it. And guess what?" "What?" "It was taken at the Monarch Club, the night before she died." I hung up and turned to Wolfe. He already knew. The limping man wasn't hiding in shadows anymore. He'd been standing in plain sight, just out of focus. The Monarch Club was protecting him. I placed the photo on Wolfe's desk. He stared at it with a look I had seen only once before, when a murderer tried to frame me, and Wolfe nearly upended the justice system to stop it. His voice was low. "We are being tested, Archie." "And how are we doing?" "That depends," Wolfe said, "on whether we catch a man who has spent 6 years escaping consequences." He closed his eyes. "And whether he is done killing. If there's a wrong way to start a day, it usually involves the Monarch Club, a liar in a tuxedo, and a missing page from a book that people kill to keep closed." At 9:31 the next morning, I strode through the club's side entrance, where the carpet smelled like old champagne and decisions people regretted before sunrise. The place was half-lit, draped in that lazy haze that follows a night of high-priced glamour and low-priced morals. Victor Hale was there ahead of me, wearing his manager's smile like armour. Trouble was, the armour had dents. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, smoothing his lapels in a futile attempt to look composed, "we're not open." "Neither is your honesty," I replied, "but I thought I'd give you another chance." His jaw twitched. "The police were here." "Good. Then you're warmed up. Let's talk about your ledger." Hale swallowed, eyes darting like he was counting exits. "What ledger?" "Don't be coy. Eleanor Vale asked for a ledger the night before she died. Membership records, private booth reservations, cash accounts. Any of this sound familiar?" He visibly sagged. "Look, she wanted the page for last Tuesday night." I made a note of the tremor in his voice. "Why?" She said someone owed her answers." "Who?" "I don't know," he lied. "One advantage of being Nero Wolfe's legman. You get a lot of practice spotting deception in its native habitat." Hale's eyes flicked to a back office door. "Bingo." "Let's see it," I said. "I can't. It's gone." "Gone?" "Torn out. Yesterday morning, before the police arrived." His hands shook. Not theatrical shaking, real fear. I let him stew 3 beats before pressing. "What was on it?" "A name," Hale whispered. "A private booth reservation, paid in cash, under the name Mr. Arden." He closed his eyes like saying the name might get him struck by lightning. I raised an eyebrow. Arden? As in Gregory Arden? Wall Street kingmaker? Or is that just what rich men with limps call themselves for fun? Hale swallowed again. I don't know. You're lying. No, his voice cracked. She... Eleanor seemed frightened. She kept saying it wasn't safe. Safe from whom? I don't know, he cried again. Maybe the first honest thing he'd said. Red herring? Possibly. Terrified accomplice, more likely. But Wolfe wouldn't accept either without proof, so I left Hale clinging to his dignity by its last thread and headed back to the brownstone. At 10:52, the elevator groaned as I rode up to Wolfe's office. Orchid hours were done. Wolfe sat at his desk with the air of a man who'd just survived a philosophical debate with a stubborn flower. He didn't look up. Report. I gave him the details. Eleanor's request for the ledger page, the missing sheet, the name Mr. Arden, Hale's tremors, and my suspicion that our limping mystery man had gone upscale. Wolfe scowled. Arden? His tone dripped with disdain. He is wealthy, yes. Powerful, yes. But a fool, and not one inclined to subtlety. Which makes him ideal for murder, I said. Or triangle dances, depends on the night. Archie, Wolfe glared at me over his clasped hands, you are inferring based on nomenclature. Okay, I said. Then how about the limp, or the fact he bankrolls half the men Eleanor knew? Wolfe dismissed it with a flick of his fingers, too quickly. Too easily. I leaned against my desk. You don't think he did it? No. Why? Because, Wolfe said with maddening calm, he lacks the imagination. And the limping man? Could be anyone, Wolfe said sharply. Do not assume identity from posture. You're rejecting Hale pretty fast. And you are being obstinate, Wolfe snapped. That was rich coming from him. Before I could respond, Wolfe lifted a hand in a rare gesture of restraint. Archie, he said softly, do be careful. This is not a matter to treat lightly. He'd said that with real concern. Wolfe showing worry for my safety is like the Chrysler Building developing stage fright. Rare, alarming, and impossible to miss. I softened my tone. Don't worry, I'll only chase billionaires with manners. He closed his eyes. Confound you. At 11:18 the phone rang. Wolfe eyed it as though it were interrupting a sacred rite. I answered. Goodwin speaking. Kramer's voice came through, low and clipped. Goodwin. Put Wolfe on. He's occupied glaring at the air. Might take a minute. Just do it. I handed Wolfe the receiver. Wolfe put it to his ear with all the enthusiasm of a man accepting a summons to mop a stable. Yes? A pause, a grunt, a heavier silence. I see, Wolfe said gravely. When? Another pause. Yes, Mr. Kramer. I will inform Goodwin. No, I have nothing for you yet. Soon. He hung up without saying goodbye. I raised an eyebrow. What's the bad news? Marco Trent, Wolfe said. Dead. His apartment. I blinked. The pianist? That's 2 people from the Monarch Club in 24 hours. It is? Inconvenient, Wolfe muttered. Inconvenient? It's a body count. Indeed, Wolfe said stiffly. Fetch Saul. At 12:07, Saul and I entered Marco Trent's apartment. The police had cleared the area, but the smell of stale tobacco, sweat and cheap liquor hung in the air like unwanted wallpaper. The piano sat open against the wall, silent now that its owner couldn't play it. Saul moved first. Police searched, but quickly. Look for what they missed. I scanned the room. You take the shadows, I'll take the stupid places. 2 minutes in, I spotted something behind the piano bench, a folded sheet of ledger paper with the edges ragged, torn from a binding. I held it up. Found the missing page. Saul leaned in. Patron name? I flipped it over. The name, whatever it had been, was obliterated by heavy black ink strokes. Someone had taken a fountain pen to it with the fury of a man erasing his own existence. Mr. Arden, I guessed. Maybe, Saul said. Maybe not. Someone didn't want us knowing. Then Saul pointed. Embossing. On the bottom corner of the page, faint but distinct, was the ghost of a seal, a circular mark you'd only get from a banking envelope. A bank, I said. Private, probably. High-end, maybe tied to the Monarch Club's financing. Saul nodded. Money trail. Always is. We kept searching. At 12:34 the break came. Marco's wall safe was hidden behind a framed poster of a French pianist with delusions of grandeur. Saul cracked the cover with a thin blade, but the dial lock itself was untouched. I pulled the brass key from my pocket, the one we'd found in Eleanor's vanity. "Moment of truth," I said. Saul watched. The key slid in cleanly. "Well, well," I murmured, opening it. Inside the safe sat one single item, a narrow envelope stamped with the seal of a holding company. The papers inside were crisp and recent. A wire transfer, not small, massive, from a shell company tied to the Monarch Club's silent partner. "Looks like someone paid Marco enough to retire," I said. "Or to kill." Saul frowned. "Or to hide something." "Or all three," I said. I tucked the papers back in place, took notes, and locked the safe again. Police property stays with the police. Our advantage comes from knowing where it was, not stealing it. "We tell Wolfe everything," I said. Saul nodded. Back at the brownstone at 1:18, I found Wolfe in his office glaring at his empty lunch plate like it had betrayed him by being empty. "Report," he said, before I could sit. I delivered it point by point. Ledger page recovered, patron name inked out, banking embossing, wall safe, brass key match, wire transfer from a shell company tied to a silent partner. Wolfe listened with mounting gravity. When I finished, he exhaled a long, slow breath. "Archie," he said quietly, "this is becoming perilous." I smirked. "Perilous keeps my job interesting." He growled. "I deplore your flippancy. You are to proceed with caution." "That's twice today you've warned me. Better be careful or I'll think you're fond of me." "Pfui," he muttered, which in wolf speak means yes, damn it, of course I am. Before I could needle him further, the kitchen doorway filled. Fritz stood there with Wolfe's 1:30 beer, frosted glass glinting like a peace offering. Wolfe accepted it without a word. That was our ritual. But the case was no longer ritual. It was personal. And now the money was talking. Loudly. There's nothing quite like being buzzed into a Wall Street penthouse to remind a man of the vast gap between what he owns and what the people who manipulate the nation's economy own. At 10:22 the next morning, I stepped out of a private elevator into a living room big enough to host a minor diplomatic summit. Everything gleamed: glass, marble, chrome, and money. A black and white panoramic view of Manhattan hung across the windows, like the city had posed for its mugshot. Gregory Arden stood by the bar, pouring nothing into nothing. He was a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than our brownstone. His hair was silver at the temples, a precisely measured, distinguished ratio. And yes, he limped, but not dramatically. It was the subtle, expensive kind of limp, the kind that says, "I survived something costly, and my insurance paid for it." "Mr. Goodwin," he said, raising his glass in greeting. "I appreciate punctuality. It's the rarest virtue left in this town." "It ranks below honesty," I said, "but above hospitality." "I offered you a drink. I want answers, not brandy." That earned me a thin, controlled smile, the tight version a man uses when he's practiced it in front of a mirror. "Very well," Arden said. He gestured to a couch that looked like it had never supported a human body. "You're here about Miss Vale?" "Eleanor," I said. "Let's not pretend she was a distant cousin twice removed. You knew her?" He nodded. "Yes, in the way wealthy men know beautiful, troubled women who occasionally need assistance." "That's poetic," I said. "Try the truth." He folded his hands. "She was attempting to blackmail me." "Original," I muttered. "Go on." "She claimed she had information that could embarrass me, something to do with the Monarch Club, ridiculous of course, but she persisted." "What did she want?" "Money, naturally, a substantial amount." "Did you pay her?" He paused. "No." "Did you threaten her?" "No." Arden's eyes held mine without blinking. "I dismissed her." "That's cold even for you." "Mr. Goodwin," he said, leaning back, "I have made peace with being misunderstood. It is the occupational hazard of influence." I glanced around the penthouse. "Looks like the hazard pays well." His smile returned, brittle. "You think I killed her?" "I think a woman who tried to blackmail a powerful man ended up dead, and you're a powerful man." He stood slowly. "Eleanor's death is unfortunate, but I assure you I had nothing to do with it." He walked, limped toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. If you want someone to blame, look to the Monarch Club, particularly their manager, Hale. She spent far more time with him than with me. It was too smooth, too rehearsed. He'd answered questions I hadn't asked yet. A red herring in a bespoke suit. "I'll check it out," I said, rising, "but I don't like being choreographed." "I have no interest in directing you," he said, "as long as you don't wander into oncoming traffic." That a warning? A suggestion. His tone remained polite. Polite men give the deadliest threats. "Good morning, Mr. Arden," I said. "Good luck, Mr. Goodwin." When I returned to the brownstone at 12:48, Wolfe was at his desk, lips compressed into a line that matched the crease in his vest. Orchid hours were over, so he had no excuse to avoid me. "Well?" he demanded, without looking up. "He's lying," I said. "Of course he's lying. About what?" "Possibly everything except his name," I said. "He's polished like a diamond and twice as hard. He admits knowing Eleanor, denies killing her, and suggests Hale might be the guilty party. Oh, and he thinks I should avoid traffic." Wolfe's eyebrow rose. "Was that a threat?" "Probably." Wolfe grimaced. "Phooey. A man who threatens indirectly is either cowardly or calculating. Neither impresses me." "He also claims Eleanor tried to blackmail him." "And you believed him?" Wolfe asked sharply. "About as much as I believe Fritz when he claims he doesn't mind me in his kitchen." Wolfe sighed. "We must not indulge theories that conveniently accommodate themselves. If a pattern fits too neatly, it is almost certainly false." "That's a rule?" "It is my rule, and it has kept me alive despite the remarkable number of people you irritate." I grinned. "Nice to know my personality contributes to your survival strategy." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Archie, fetch Mr. Hale." "You want him here?" "Yes." "Against his will?" "I presume so," Wolfe said dryly. Victor Hale arrived at 1:37 looking like a man walking into a dentist's office where the drill was already running. Fritz showed him in with the polite disdain he reserves for people who upset meal schedules. Hale perched on the edge of the red chair. Wolfe regarded him like an entomologist studying a beetle that might be poisonous. "Hale," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin informs me you omitted details. I told him everything." "Nonsense," Wolfe said. "Begin again." Hale's face glistened. "Miss Vale, Eleanor, discovered something. Club records. A second ledger, not the official one. A private book. For special arrangements." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" "Hush payments. Patron agreements. Names of men who paid to keep certain memberships secret." "You mean blackmail?" I said. "No," Hale shouted. "It wasn't that. More like insurance." "Insurance that someone would commit murder to protect," Wolfe said icily. Hale crumpled. "She threatened to make the list public. She told me the club didn't deserve to hide its sins. I swear, I didn't touch her. I only told Marco to hide the ledger until we could figure out what to do." "Where?" "I don't know. Marco never told me." "Convenient," I said. Hale wrung his hands. "Look, I didn't kill her. I'm not brave enough." That part, at least, I believed. Wolfe dismissed him with a flick of his fingers. "Go. Do not leave the city." Hale fled like a man who wanted nothing more than to leave the planet. At 3:12 the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared in the office doorway holding a white envelope on a tray, as though it were a poisonous snake instead of mail. "This arrived, sir," Fritz said. "Addressed to Mr. Goodwin." Wolfe extended a hand. "Give it here." "Hey," I said, "it's mine." Wolfe pinned me with a look that could flatten a rhinoceros. "Archie, do not argue." Fritz placed the envelope in Wolfe's palm and retreated. Wolfe examined it. No return address, Manhattan postmark, typed label. He slit it open with his thumb and withdrew a single glossy photograph. The picture showed me walking into Gregory Arden's penthouse earlier that morning. Across the bottom, scrawled in sharp black ink, "Stop digging Goodwin." For a long moment, Wolfe did not move. Then he set the picture down, very carefully, as though it were an unexploded bomb. "Archie," he said softly. "Yes?" "You will not approach Mr. Arden again until I say so." It wasn't a request, it wasn't even an order. It was something rare, Wolfe revealing that he actually, profoundly, cared if I stayed alive. I leaned back in my chair and tried for levity. Look at that. 2 warnings in 24 hours. You'll spoil me. Wolfe glared. Your flippancy is repugnant. Repugnant affection, I said lightly. He growled, which meant I was right. At 4:47 the phone rang. I picked up. Goodwin, Kramer said, voice tight. Inspector, what's on fire now? The DA, Kramer muttered. He wants answers about Eleanor's political connections, wants to know who she was seeing, who she was calling, what she knew, and he wants them yesterday. So do I. You want help? A sigh. Then, unexpectedly, all right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your report, if you have one. It was the closest Kramer came to a handshake. I hung up, relayed it to Wolfe. He nodded once. Good. Pressure clarifies motives. And breaks skulls, I added. Archie. Yes, sir? Be cautious. That made 3 warnings in one day. When Wolfe repeats himself, the world is shifting, and this case was shifting faster than the ground under a skyscraper being built in the wrong place. If you ever want to ruin a perfectly serviceable morning, try breaking into a dead pianist's place of business in the company of 2 detectives and a conscience. At 9:46 a.m., Saul, Ori, and I met on the sidewalk outside the Monarch Club, where the neon was mercifully off but the smell of last night's smoke still clung to the walls like a hangover. We're not breaking in, Ori insisted, smoothing his tie. We're assisting an active investigation. Sure, I said, and I'm a ballerina. Saul gave me a faint look, the Panzer equivalent of a chuckle, and produced a slim toolkit. Let's proceed. Inside, the club was dead quiet, daylight revealing the truth behind glamour. Scuffed floors, sagging upholstery, and a faint smell of sweat that money couldn't perfume away. The pianist's corner sat empty, his piano covered with a tarp that somehow made the room feel funereal. Marco kept his personal things here, Ori muttered. Rumour was he napped behind the curtains when Hale wasn't looking. Let's hope he kept secrets too, I said. Saul approached the piano with surgeon-like precision. Bench first. He lifted the lid. Sheet music, pencils, rosin dust. Nothing helpful. He tapped the bottom panel, frowning. Then a soft click. Hidden compartment, Saul said. Ori whistled. Score 1 for the maestro. Saul slid out a narrow wooden tray. Empty. No pages. No ledger. No nothing. Well, I said, either Marco had a dramatic flair for storage or someone beat us to it. Ori's face twisted. Who knew it was here? Whoever killed him, I said, and whoever wants us running in circles. The motif was clear. Erased histories, destroyed evidence, vanished pages, same old song but sung in a new key. Saul searched the bench interior with a small flashlight. Clean, removed recently. How recently? I asked. Hours, Saul said. Perhaps minutes. That did it. I moved through the room, searching for any sign of disturbance. Nothing. The killer was efficient. Footsteps echoed from the front entrance. Police, Saul murmured. And there he was, Inspector Kramer, entering with the sour look of a man forced to attend a party he did not approve of. What the hell are you doing here? He snapped, though the volume stayed reasonable. This place is sealed. Looking for what you missed, I said. Good morning to you too. Kramer jabbed a finger in my direction. Your guy might be useful if he actually talked to police before the world burns down. I'll pass along the compliment, I said. He'll have it bronzed. Kramer grunted, scrubbed a hand across his face and peered into the empty compartment. Ledger? Gone, Saul confirmed. All pages removed. Terrific, Kramer's jaw clenched, which means we're back at square one, except the square is on fire. I nudged the piano leg. Inspector, whoever took those pages took them fast. Someone knew we were coming. Kramer nodded grudgingly. I'll buy that. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He looked tired, a man juggling DA pressure, political sharks, and a nightclub full of suspects who could buy and sell the city. Tell Wolfe, he muttered. I'll expect something from him that doesn't make my life harder. That's outside his skill set, I answered. This time, Kramer almost smiled. Almost. Back at the brownstone at 12:03, Wolfe was descending in the elevator with the regal disapproval of a man torn from orchid perfection before the appointed hour. You're early, he said as I entered the office. And you're cranky, I said. We all suffer. He sank into his chair. Report. I gave him the whole mess, The empty compartment, the missing pages, the timing, Kramer's cameo, and the sensation of a murderer walking 2 steps ahead of us. Wolfe closed his eyes. Archie, the second ledger was not for blackmail. That contradicts everything we've heard. It contradicts what we were told, Wolfe corrected. It does not contradict fact. You're sure? He opened his eyes, dark, intense, and too still. Think. Hush payments recorded in a secret ledger, paid regularly. Why? To suppress an indiscretion? No. That would require multiple parties. This, he tapped the desk, was narrow, focused. So what was it hiding? A death, Wolfe said softly. I straightened. Eleanor, you mean? No, older, perhaps years older. He lifted the photograph of Eleanor, the smiling one, not the corpse. A death she discovered, a death she believed she could expose. That's why she went after the ledger. Yes. And Marco hid it after she died. Yes. And someone killed him to keep it hidden. Wolfe nodded once. Eleanor Vale was searching for the truth about a disappearance. Whose? He breathed, slow, heavy. Clara Dane. The name hit the air with the weight of a gravestone. I pulled my chair closer. Who was Clara Dane? A young woman, Wolfe said. She came to the Monarch Club 6 years ago. She vanished afterward. And Eleanor knew her? No. Eleanor came to me. His lips tightened. She asked my help. She believed Clara had been harmed. My stomach flipped. The case you turned down. Yes. You didn't forget the murder, I said quietly. You forgot the woman who asked you to stop it. Wolfe flinched. Just a hair, just enough. Phooey, he muttered, but not with force. I forgot nothing. I merely failed. The admission sat between us like a cracked bell. Before I could respond, the phone rang. Wolfe gestured irritably. I answered. Goodwin. Saul's voice came through, calm as ever. Archie, tell me you found something that doesn't involve more corpses. Not corpses, purchases, the ledger pages. I stood. Where? An anonymous buyer acquired them this morning, through a courier. Who hired the courier? Eleanor Vale's landlady. I froze. Mrs. Renford? Yes. She accepted a delivery job yesterday, an envelope. Heavy. Damn, I murmured. She sold the ledger pages. Not sold, Saul said. Delivered. Someone paid her to move them. A cold jolt ran down my spine. Did she know what she was carrying? No. Then who paid her? Unknown. Transaction was cash. I felt Wolfe staring at me. What now? I asked Saul. One more detail, he said. The buyer's description doesn't match Hale or Arden. Tall, slim, walked with a slight limp, I finished. Yes. I hung up, turned to Wolfe. He already knew. His expression was thunder in slow motion. The limping man, I said, is still ahead of us. Wolfe lifted the original photograph of Eleanor. The background neon shimmered. The shadow of a limp lingered behind her in grainy silhouette. The erased pages, the second ledger, the vanished girl, the silent partner. None of it was random. We were chasing a ghost with money, reach, and a 6-year head start. And he wasn't done moving pieces. Wolfe leaned back, fingertips pressed together. Archie, we must locate Mrs. Renford. And ask what? Not what, Wolfe said. Whom? He closed his eyes. That courier, he murmured, is the hinge on which all this turns. The clock ticked. The orchids upstairs waited. And I knew the case had just crossed the midpoint, and the ground beneath us was starting to tilt. There are few places in New York more depressing than a hallway that smells of boiled cabbage and overdue rent, and Mrs. Renford's building had cornered the market. At 10:09 the next morning, I knocked on her door for the second time in a week, this time with Saul Panzer standing behind me like a polite thunderstorm. If Mrs. Renford had secrets, Saul would smell them faster than a foxhound. The latch rattled. The door opened a cautious inch. Oh, she breathed, spotting me. You again? Me again, I said brightly. With a friend. He's the quiet one. I'm the charming one. Saul tipped his hat. Ma'am. Mrs. Renford hesitated, then stepped back. I don't have anything else to tell you. That's what we're here to discuss, I said, stepping inside. Her parlour was the same cramped display of frayed rugs, mismatched furniture, and one sad potted fern that looked like it had given up hope, sometime during the Hoover administration. A clock ticked anxiously from the mantel, as though waiting for the building to foreclose itself. I motioned for her to sit. She perched on the sofa like a bird watching hawks. "Mrs. Renford," I began, "we know you hired a courier yesterday." Her spine stiffened. "No, I didn't," Saul cut in, gentle but immovable. "Ma'am, the courier service confirmed your signature." Her eyes darted to the floor. I leaned back in the chair. "Let's skip the denials. You had something. Someone paid you to move it. Now, did you know what it was?" "No!" She wrung her hands. "I didn't, I swear." "Then why accept the job?" Her voice trembled. "My son. He owes money. Gambling. He promised he'd stop, but—" I nodded. "Debts need paying." Tears welled in her eyes. "They said they'd break his legs. I didn't know what I was delivering." Saul stepped forward slightly. "What did Eleanor give you?" Mrs. Renford's face crumpled. "She left an envelope with me, weeks ago. Told me to keep it safe. Said I should send it on if anything happened to her. She also left a flat little safe deposit key in a paper sleeve with a bank's name stamped on it and told me not to lose it." "You ever look inside?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "I was afraid." "What happened after she died?" I panicked. Then a man came, said he was a lawyer, said he represented someone close to her." She swallowed. "He gave me cash, a lot of it, to send the envelope through the courier service. I didn't want trouble." I exchanged a glance with Saul. "This lawyer, name?" I don't remember." But Saul was already opening his notebook. "Tall, thin, dark suit?" "Yes," she said shakily. "He said his client wanted to honor Eleanor's wishes." "Client?" I asked. "Who?" She hesitated. "He never said, but he mentioned the club." "The Monarch Club?" I pressed. She nodded. There it was. The price of secrets had just skyrocketed. Saul closed his notebook. "Thank you, ma'am." As we left, the fern wilted another inch. At 11:02, Saul and I walked into the Monarch Club through the service entrance. The staff pretended we were invisible, which was generous of them. Hale was in his office, pretending to review paperwork while sweating like a man reading his own obituary. "You sent a lawyer," I said. Hale jerked upright. "What?" "Save it," I told him. "We know Mrs. Renford delivered Eleanor's envelope, and your lawyer picked it up." "I didn't," he started, then stopped. His shoulders sagged. All right. Yes, I sent him." "Why?" Saul asked calmly. "Because I knew what Eleanor had," Hale whispered. "She trusted that landlady. I knew she'd left something behind." "And you wanted it," I said. "Yes, I wanted it gone." Saul folded his arms. "What was inside?" Hale's voice dropped. "The second ledger, the real one." The air in the office thickened. I leaned in. "Talk." He swallowed. 6 years ago there was an incident. A girl, Clara Dane, she came to the club. Young, frightened. Arden, he was involved. She died. Accident, I swear it. But Arden panicked. Paid us to keep it quiet. I handled the logistics. Marco helped hide evidence. "And Eleanor?" I asked. "She found out," Hale said miserably. "I don't know how. She said we were covering up a death. She threatened to expose the ledger." "And then she died," I said flatly. Hale flinched. "I didn't kill her, I swear." "Marco?" Saul asked. Hale hesitated. "Arden ordered it. Both deaths, I think. He has the power, the money. I was just a coward," I supplied. "Yes," Hale whispered. "But why did Marco ink out Arden's name?" I pressed. Hale blinked. "I don't know. Maybe he wanted to protect him." Wolfe wasn't going to buy that. Neither did I. I stepped back. "You're coming with us." Hale paled. "To Wolfe?" "Yes. Don't faint. He only eats people metaphorically." At 12:19, Hale stood before Wolfe looking like a schoolboy sent to the principal for burning the building down. Wolfe studied him, fingers steepled. "Mr. Hale, you have lied repeatedly." Hale wilted. "I'm telling the truth now." "Pfui," Wolfe said. "You are telling a story that casts you as reluctant, helpless, blameless. That alone condemns it." Hale swallowed. "But it's the truth." "No," Wolfe said gently. "It is your truth, a narrative sculpted to preserve your skin." I allowed myself a smirk, which, admittedly, is not a lot of surface area. Wolfe ignored me. If Marco inked out Mr. Arden's name, it was not to protect him, it was to protect someone else, or something else. Hale stammered. "Then who?" "Leave," Wolfe commanded. "But Archie will escort you out." I gladly obliged. At 1:41, Fritz appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said. "Inspector Kramer on the telephone." Wolfe blew out a breath. "Very well." I took the receiver. "Goodwin," Kramer barked. "Put Wolfe on, now." I handed it over. Wolfe held the phone to his ear. "Yes, Inspector?" A pause. "I see." Another pause. "How long?" A longer pause. "I understand. Thank you." He hung up. I leaned forward. "Bad news?" Wolfe looked at me, his expression unusually grave. "Gregory Arden," he said softly, "has disappeared." I blinked. "Disappeared how?" "His penthouse is empty. His staff is gone. His car missing. No trace." "So, he ran." "Or," Wolfe murmured, "someone removed him." The room chilled. Even the orchids upstairs might have felt it. I gave a low whistle. "We've circled the globe and landed back where we started, except the globe's on fire and the landing gear's missing." "Archie," Wolfe said, "do stop dramatizing." But his voice lacked conviction. He stared toward the window where Manhattan's skyline glimmered. The limping man, the silent partner, the ledger, the vanished girl, all of it was accelerating. And the man with the answers had just vanished into thin air. If there's one thing I've learned about wealthy men in Manhattan, it's that they don't disappear quietly. They vanish with fanfare, smoke, mirrors, and lawyers. So at 9:31 the next morning, when Wolfe told me Gregory Arden's disappearance was preposterously tidy, I knew we were in for a day that would make a Paul Whiteman rehearsal look subtle. Wolfe sat at his desk, index fingers pressed together, contemplating a diagram that existed nowhere except inside his skull. Saul Panzer stood nearby in his usual posture, slightly forward, slightly watchful, as if the universe might drop a clue to the floor and he wanted to catch it before it cracked. "Arden did not flee," Wolfe said. "He was made to appear to flee." "That's an expensive way to take a vacation," I said. "Why would someone go to the trouble?" "To misdirect," Wolfe murmured. "To manipulate the narrative." "Narratives are your thing," I said. "Mine's walking into danger on command." Saul flicked me a sideways smile. "You walk into danger without being asked, Archie." He wasn't wrong. Wolfe pointed his finger, imperiously of course. "You and Mr. Panzer will go to the Midtown garage owned by Arden's chauffeur's cousin." I blinked. "How did you get that piece of trivia?" "Archie," Wolfe said, with the long-suffering tone of a saint correcting a toddler. "I read." "Must be nice," I said. "Most of us have to work for a living." Wolfe grunted. "Find the car. Report immediately." At 10:42 a.m., Saul and I approached the garage, a sleek, high-end establishment that smelled faintly of gasoline and expensive polish, like someone had tried to make automotive fumes genteel. The neon sign gleamed in the sunlight, promising first-class service for first-class egos. A kid in a spotless uniform looked us over, decided we weren't here to tip, and waved us toward the back. Saul moved gracefully between rows of polished cars, Packards, Buicks, one Cadillac convertible that could have doubled as a yacht. We reached the last stall, concealed behind a stack of tire crates. Saul stopped. There. Arden's car. Untouched. Dust undisturbed. A perfect alibi posing as a vehicle. "Someone went through a lot of trouble," I said, "to hide something no one should be able to find." "Or," Saul replied, "they wanted it to be found." That sat in the air like an overdue bill. I pulled open the door, keys still inside, gas tank full, a neatly folded driving glove lay on the passenger seat. Arden hadn't touched the car, he hadn't fled. The pattern was breaking in real time. The garage door clanged behind us. "Goodwin!" a familiar voice barked. Kramer. Not stomping, not bellowing, just irritated on a low simmer. He approached with a detective at his side and a cigar clenched between his fingers, like a man trying to decide whether to smoke it or strangle someone with it. "How the hell," he began, "did you two get here before me?" "Superior navigation skills," I said. "Plus, Saul prefers not to get lost." Kramer gave me a look. Don't be cute. I have no other setting. His eyes shifted to Saul, then to the car. So, Arden didn't run. Not unless he left without his limbs, I said. Car hasn't moved. Kramer's jaw tightened. I don't like this. Anything in particular? I asked. He jerked his thumb toward the exit. Someone tipped me off. Anonymous caller, very calm, too calm. Not Hale? I asked. No. Arden himself. If Arden were calling me, Kramer said, he wouldn't do it quietly. He moved toward the car, circling, studying. His expression hardened into something close to insulted professionalism. I don't like being steered, he muttered. It wasn't meant for me, but I heard it anyway. We're all being steered, I said. The trick is figuring out who's at the wheel. Kramer snapped his head up, and for a moment the friction eased. A grudging acknowledgement passed between us. Tell Wolfe, Kramer said quietly, that for once I agree with him. I'll frame it, I replied. Back at the brownstone at 12:58, Wolfe heard our report, leaned back, and closed his eyes like a man listening to a symphony only he understood. It is as I thought, he said. Arden is innocent. That made me sit up. Innocent of what? The murders? The cover-up? The ledger? That's a lot of innocence. Wolfe opened his eyes. Arden was complicit 6 years ago, but recent events suggest he is not the one orchestrating the present manipulation. Saul folded his hands. Then who is? Someone with deeper access, Wolfe said. Someone who can manipulate the staff, misdirect the police timeline, influence both the club's operations and the flow of information. Hale? I asked. No. Why not? Wolfe lifted a brow. He does not limp. That's your metric? I asked. Archie, he said sharply. If Hale did not limp, he had no reason to fear being identified, yet the limping man intervened repeatedly, in Eleanor's last movements, in the courier's job, in the garage staging. If Hale acted alone, he would not create misdirection involving a limp he does not possess. I admitted it was solid. So Hale's lying, I said, but not about everything. Correct. He omitted the presence of another authority within the club. Saul's voice was steady. Another partner. Wolfe nodded. Someone Marco protected. That sparked memory. Marco inked out Arden's name on the ledger page, but not to hide Arden, to hide someone else. Precisely, Wolfe said. He obfuscated the name out of loyalty, not fear. I leaned back, thinking aloud. Meaning someone powerful enough to make Marco betray Arden, or loyal enough to deserve that kind of sacrifice. Or dangerous enough, Wolfe murmured. Before I could reply, the bell rang, 2 short buzzes, Saul's signal. Fritz appeared, holding the door open. Mr. Pantzer is returning, he announced as though Saul hadn't left 10 minutes earlier. Saul entered, carrying a slim folder with the reverence of a priest transporting holy water. Found it, he said. Found what? I asked. Proof. He laid the folder on Wolfe's desk. Inside was a single financial ledger sheet, elegant, coded, unmistakably expensive. Wolfe scanned it once and nodded. Ah, I craned over his shoulder. The entries showed monthly payments, not to Hale, to Marco Trent. Paid by, I whispered. Gregory Arden, Saul finished. My jaw hit the floor. So Marco wasn't exposing Arden, he was protecting him. Loyalty, Wolfe said, or leverage, or both. Saul added, and the ink blot on the torn ledger page, it wasn't meant to erase Arden, it was meant to erase the payment source listed beneath his name. I asked, which was? Saul pointed to the lowest faded notation. A second silent partner, someone with equal control. Wolfe closed the folder. And that gentleman changes everything, I exhaled, because it means Arden wasn't the top of the pyramid. No, Wolfe said softly. He was the front. And the real killer? I asked. Wolfe's voice dropped to a growl. A person so far unseen, someone who could make Arden vanish, make Eleanor fear, make Marco comply, and make Hale tremble. Wonderful, I said. We've narrowed it down to everyone in Manhattan with money. Wolfe ignored me. We need only one more proof. And what's that? I asked. Why Clara Dane died. And who benefited? Saul added. I nodded. And who's willing to kill again? Wolfe pressed his fingertips together. If we find that, he said, we find everything. At that moment, Fritz appeared in the doorway with Wolfe's 1 p.m. lunch tray. Ritual, grounding, ordinary. The scent of herb broth floated through the room. Wolfe glanced at the tray, then at the ledger. His eyes darkened. "Archie," he said quietly, "after lunch, assemble everyone. This pattern is about to break entirely." And somewhere in Manhattan, a limping ghost tightened his grip on a truth worth killing for. If there's a particular electricity to a brownstone showdown, it's because you know nobody in the room wants to be there, except Wolfe, who lives for it, and me, who likes to watch everyone sweat. At 6:01 p.m., I opened the office door and ushered in the final parade of misery. Victor Hale, pale as chalk, Mrs. Renford trembling, Lila Dawn trying to look glamorous but failing under guilt, Arden's lawyer twitching like he'd swallowed his retainer, and the Monarch Club's accountant adjusting his tie like it might protect him from divine judgment. Inspector Kramer arrived last, planting himself behind Wolfe's chair with the posture of a man who'd already worked a 14-hour day and expected to work 14 more if Wolfe didn't give him something airtight. The cigar between his fingers smouldered without flame, more punctuation than smoke. Wolfe sat at his desk, mountainous and immovable, eyes half-lidded like a lion who knew dinner would wander directly into its jaws. I took my seat at the typewriter, fingers ready, heart thumping with the thrill only a final reveal can deliver. Wolfe cleared his throat. The room obeyed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this is not a trial, though the consequences will be no less significant." Hale whimpered softly. Wolfe ignored him. "You are here because each of you holds a piece of a death. In some cases, 2 deaths." Mrs. Renford's hands trembled. Lila stared resolutely at the carpet. The lawyer pretended he was made of marble. Wolfe's voice sharpened. 6 years ago, a young woman named Clara Dane entered the Monarch Club. She discovered something she should not have. He lifted a sheet of paper. The club had been operating what it called a patronage arrangement. In truth, it was coercion by contract, favours exchanged privately for silence publicly. The accountant croaked. I only recorded the numbers. Be silent," Wolfe commanded. The man obeyed. Wolfe continued. Clara Dane resisted. She protested. She threatened to expose the arrangement. He leaned forward. And she was killed for it. Gasps. A stifled sob. The crackle of Kramer's cigar paper crinkling under pressure. Wolfe's gaze swept the room. Marco Trent, pianist, employee, and accomplice, pushed her down the service stairwell. Mrs. Renford covered her mouth. Lila let out a strangled whisper. "Marco?" "Indeed," Wolfe said. His limp, small but noticeable, came from an old injury, a fact Clara herself documented in her diary. He tapped the flat bank key from Mrs. Renford on his blotter. "The diary housed in the safe deposit box this key belongs to." The lawyer stiffened. This is circumstantial." "Do not waste my air," Wolfe said coldly. "Mr. Pantzer retrieved the diary at 4:47 this afternoon. Its content is explicit." All eyes swung to Saul, silent, implacable, confirming everything simply by existing. Wolfe went on. After Clara's death, Victor Hale assumed responsibility for the patronage records. Gregory Arden, fearful of scandal, provided funds to suppress the truth. Hale's head dropped. Wolfe's voice stayed level. "But secrets ferment. They do not disappear." He lifted Clara's diary and flipped to a marked page. Here, she describes Marco's limp. Here, his threats. Here, her fear. Kramer inhaled sharply. "That seals Marco for Clara's death." "Yes," Wolfe said, "but not alone." The lawyer stammered. "This is absurd." "Hush," Wolfe said flatly. "Your protestations insult us both." Archie Goodwin, 1. Lawyer, 0. Wolfe continued. 6 years later, Eleanor Vale uncovered the truth. She asked me, to investigate. His voice wavered the barest fraction. I declined, for reasons of scheduling. Hale snorted bitterly. Wolfe's glare shut him down. Miss Vale pursued the investigation herself. She confronted Marco. He killed her. Lila Dawn whimpered. "He said she'd run away." "He lied," Wolfe said. Kramer stepped forward. "Then who killed Marco? Because his autopsy didn't show suicide." Wolfe turned his gaze like a searchlight. "Victor Hale." Hale let out a thin wheeze. "No, No, Marco begged me. He said—" Wolfe raised a hand. Marco staged the scene to appear murdered by Arden. He hoped to deflect blame, but Marco could not bruise the back of his own neck. The angle was impossible. You held him while he strangled himself. A sound like a soul collapsing came from Hale. "That's not true," he cried. "It is documented," Wolfe replied. "Your fingerprints, faint but present, were found on Marco's collar by the medical examiner. Inspector Kramer has the report." Kramer looked startled, then impressed. "Damn it, I do." Hale sagged. Wolfe pressed on, relentless. "You assisted Marco 6 years ago. You assisted him again last week. And when your partner in crime became a liability, you eliminated him." "No," Hale whispered. "He said it was the only way to keep the club safe, to protect all of us." "Protect," Wolfe echoed. "You protected nothing. You merely delayed the inevitable." The lawyer sputtered. "My client denies—" "He may deny oxygen if he chooses," Wolfe said. "It will not alter the facts." The room was frozen. You could have heard Kramer's heartbeat. Wolfe leaned back, letting the enormity settle. "Now for the false trails," Wolfe said. "The limp attributed to Gregory Arden. False. His injury occurred 4 years after Clara's death." Kramer grunted. "That explains that." "The staged disappearance of Arden's car. False," Wolfe continued. "Crafted by Mr. Hale to suggest an orchestrated flight." Hale sobbed into his hands. "The inked-out name on the torn ledger page. False," Wolfe said. "Marco did not hide Arden. He hid the second silent partner, Victor Hale." The accountant fainted. I caught him by the collar and lowered him to his chair. It was the most useful he'd been all night. Wolfe folded his hands. Finally, the brass key. He held it up, gleaming under the lamp. This key opened Clara Dane's safe deposit box. Inside was her diary, her full account, her truth. He nodded to Saul. Saul handed over a thin leather diary, sealed with a ribbon the bank clerk had insisted on. Wolfe opened it, removed a page, and read, "Marco came again. He limped, he threatened. He says Hale will handle everything. I don't believe him. They think I won't tell anyone. They're wrong." Hale's face turned the colour of death warmed over. "That is enough," Wolfe said. Kramer stepped forward, voice quiet but decisive. "Victor Hale, stand up." Hale obeyed only because gravity had forgotten him. "You are under arrest for the murders of Eleanor Vale and Marco Trent, and accessory to the murder of Clara Dane. Anything you—" Hale broke, completely, utterly. "I'm sorry," he wailed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean— I tried. I thought—" Kramer nodded to Stebbins, who entered from the hall like a bulldog answering its cue. Together they escorted Hale out, his pleas echoing futilely down the hallway. The remaining suspects sat paralyzed, wide-eyed, sweating. Wolfe dismissed them with a wave. "You may go. Inspector Kramer will contact you if necessary." They fled like cockroaches when the kitchen light comes on. When the door finally clicked shut, Kramer turned back to Wolfe. His voice lost its edge. "I'll file it clean," he said. "Good work, Wolfe." Wolfe inclined his head as though accepting a diplomatic gift. Kramer left, the sound of his footsteps fading into the dusk. Silence reclaimed the brownstone. Wolfe lifted himself with effort. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "I am retiring to the Orchids." "Of course you are." He paused in the doorway. "This was unpleasant." "Truth usually is," I said softly. He gave a grunt that might have been agreement, then vanished upstairs. I closed the office door, leaned against the desk, and let out a long breath. Then, as a personal victory gesture, I poured myself a glass of milk. Wolfe's voice materialized behind me like a reprimanding ghost. "Confound you, Archie. Must you gloat?" I grinned at the glass. "Only when you protect me first." Fade out on the brownstone where justice had once again been wrestled from the jaws of Manhattan's shadows.